Perret. And the title of her presentation is, oh, and Meg, you're in Sciences and Society?
Yes, I am.
And she's finishing the Sciences and Society course thread. And the title of her presentation is Reflections on Being Polydisciplinamorous, Science, Affect, and Queer Attachments.
Hey, everyone. So my name's Meg, and I'm a triple major in Gender and Women's Studies, Interdisciplinary Studies, and Integrative Biology. My focus in interdisciplinary studies is in science, technology, and society. And my primary research interests are in feminist science studies, so that kind of brings together all three of the fields that I'm in. So I'm in the Science and Society course thread. These are some of the classes that I've taken that are listed on the website. And as you can see, some of them are science classes, which I was really happy to see on the list. And GWS is Gender and Women's Studies, and also got a rhetoric class in there. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about this word that I'm throwing out there, polydisciplinamorous or polydisciplinamory. And this is actually a word that I'm borrowing from a book by this title. And it's supposed to be a play on words. So polyamory is when folks have multiple partners, and it's folks are like committed to each of their partners. So like you have a complete relationship with that person. And so we have, you know, a shortened version of disciplinary stuck in the middle of there. So it's supposed to indicate that you're committed to multiple different disciplines. So what I really like about this word is that it's not like my allegiances to these different departments are fractured or partial, but I really am interested in biology. I really am interested in feminist theory, and that these two fields, among others, are actually really important to me as a scholar and as a person. And then the other part that I really like about this word is that polyamory has been seen as a kind of rejection of like heterosexual monogamy, and so there's a kind of queerness to that. And so I really do think that doing interdisciplinary work is a kind of queering of departmental boundaries that has a kind of playfulness, passion involved. And so it's, for me, it is really about transgressing boundaries and breaking down the historical codification of knowledge. And so it has a kind of political element. So I'm a really big doodler. I don't know if you all saw, but I was doodling. I was listening, but I was doodling. And that's how I kind of process a lot of my thoughts. So these are two doodles that I put up that I did in class this semester. And they're really reflections on being an interdisciplinary student. So the one on my right, so your left, is an image of some kind of being that has multiple mouths. And so for me, this image is really about speaking in many tongues and many voices. And so it's about like being able to articulate interests across disciplines. So, you know, like the left mouth is like my feminist lens, and, you know, for example. And then the other image is from a series of images that I've been drawing about a face that feels like it's being imprisoned. And so that's what the chains on the neck are. And the face looks kind of like haggard and like upset. But it's saying occupy the syllabus, so it's a kind of like a resistance. And for me, that's what being interdisciplinary is really about. It's about resisting the way that knowledge has been split up, and about doing a kind of epistemic reparation of this. And so for my case specifically, I'm really interested in feminist theory and post-colonial critique. And so in my path to being an interdisciplinary scholar, it's really about bringing those kind of marginalized perspectives into other disciplines. So I go into the biology classroom and I ask questions through a feminist lens. I go into environmental studies and I'm asking about environmental racism, I'm asking about colonial histories in the land. And so for me, it's this polydisciplinamory, like queerness, is about a political orientation. And so that's what the Occupy the Syllabus image is kind of getting at. So here are some just kind of general questions that I've come across as I've been on campus. And really, these are all kind of all of these questions kind of fit into a larger framework of feminist science studies, which is what I'm interested in. So I'll just read a couple. How has science been implicated in histories of colonialism, racism, and capitalism? Is scientific practice gendered? Spoilers, yes, it is. Can there be a feminist science? And what does it mean to be human in the Anthropocene? So this, the third question, can there be a feminist science, is really one that I'm thinking about this semester. And so here's some research projects that I've been involved in through my time on campus, either as a research assistant or as my own projects. So as you can see, there's a really wide range of projects. I mean, come on, zombies, that's pretty random. But they all really link back to taking a critical perspective on science and society. So like, for example, the first one, a vegan feminist critique of humane meat. That was a project I did with a professor at Stanford. And we were really looking at how science has been a grounding place for truth about how we should treat animals. But we're kind of pushing back on the way that science is being used in that way. A couple of other ones. The last two are relate to things I've been thinking about in relation to like, what does it mean to be human in the midst of the mass extinction crisis that's happening? Like amphibians are like really on the verge of extinction, like basically all of them. And so I'm just like really thinking about what does it mean to do science in that context? What does it mean to be a human in that context? And so these last two were projects that I did for the precursor class to my gender and women's studies thesis, and then over the summer as a surf scholar. And I'd be happy to answer any more questions about these topics at the end if you're interested. But I really wanted to talk a little bit about the research I'm doing right now. So this is the title of my thesis and process, Barbara McClintock, Interspecies Intimacy and Methodological Disruption, a Queer Intervention into Feminist Epistemology. And for those of you who don't know who Barbara McClintock is, she's a Nobel Prize-winning cytogeneticist, and she was doing work primarily on maize plants, and that's what the background of this slideshow is. She was the first woman to get a Nobel Prize on her own. There had been two previous women who got Nobel Prizes, but they got it in conjunction with other folks. And there's been a couple of books on her, and a lot of people have suggested that she practiced a science that was more in line with feminist values. And so I was kind of interested in that. Research question around like, well, okay, is it feminist? How is it feminist? How is it maybe not feminist? And then, you know, the kind of broader question of what does it mean to be a feminist and do science? And so this quote on the side here is the epigraph to my paper currently. And it's, I know every plant in the field. I know them intimately, and I find great pleasure to know them. And this is a picture of Barbara McClintock on her 90th birthday. And so I was planning on reading a little piece of my thesis, just to give you all a taste of what using queer theory and feminist theory to look at. Oh, has it been 15 minutes? Oh, sorry, I can't see that far.
Just about, it says 5 more.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'll just read a couple of paragraphs then, to give you all a taste of what looking at feminist and queer theory in a scientific context looks like. So let's see. So Barbara McClintock's intimate knowledge of her maize plants, her primary research organisms, is among the most cited aspects of her research in discussions of the gendered aspects of her methodology. Yet, little has been written that explicitly characterizes the mundane material practices that structure everyday plant biologist encounters in McClintock's research on maize cytogenetics. Inspired by the work of multi-species ethnographers, I propose an attention to the bodily, the sensory, and the fleshy aspects of interspecies contact in McClintock's research. After considering the possibility that McClintock's methodology is feminine or feminist or gender-free, This paper ultimately argues that the plant biologist encounters in McClintock's research on maize cytogenetics can better be understood as a kind of queer moment of what I'm calling methodological disruption. So with an attention to the sensory, I ask, what can the mundane moments of interspecies contact in McClintock's cornfields teach us about the queerness of multi-species encounters in scientific research? In order to answer this question, I will examine the 5 primary sensory systems that McClintock used when engaging with her maize: the heart, the hand, the eye, the mind, and the ear. So I'm going to skip forward to the section titled The Hand. So maize genetics is hard work. Year after year, 10 months of meticulous planning culminate in 6 7-day weeks of 24 hours of planting and tending to 3,000 corn seedlings. Everyday scientific practices, irrigating, transplanting, plowing, fertilizing soil, harvesting ears, controlling temperature and water content, watching for insects are intensely corporeal, involving regular contact with their objects of study. But with constant vigilance, in a matter of weeks, each stalk will rise to a 6 to 8 feet plant. By midsummer, 2 or 3 of the shoots emerge with well-developed ears of corn. The bodily contact of maize genetics is not without consequence for those involved. While most maize geneticists employed field laborers and students to assist them with physical labor of maize genetics, McClintock legendarily did everything herself. Nearly half a decade of this intense physical labor took a toll on Barbara McClintock. And then she has a series of letters where she writes to a friend saying how she's exhausted, even though she's still intensely interested in her research. And so she makes the decision to scale back her corn planting because of this exhaustion. But we still get the sense that there's this kind of tension between the intense pleasure she feels from doing science and the physical exhaustion that she experiences as a result of those feelings. So McClintock's plants are also physically shaped by the plant biologist encounters in maize genetics. One of her colleagues maintains that her plants differed significantly from the standardized research corn plants. In the 1900s, big agriculture was beginning to invest in maize genetics research. By the end of World War II, this agriculture had its hands in all of the major institutions and research centers for maize cytogenetics. And so as a result, the cornfield was becoming increasingly rationalized and standardized and being used to produce more productive corn plants. But McClintock resisted this, what I'm calling alienated science. Her cornfields were a site in which the scientist mixes her labor with the soil and produces corn plants through a relation rather than through mirroring some kind of external corporate motivator. So I'm going to skip forward a little bit. But what this section is ultimately arguing is that this plant scientist touching that's happening is a kind of becoming with, which is a term I'm taking from Donna Haraway. And this becoming with means that our lives are in connection. Each becoming depends on our relationships with other beings and non-living beings. So McClintock and her maize plants, they depend on each other for both their material existence and for their semiotic existence. So for example, McClintock would not be a scientist without her plants. Her plants literally would not be alive without her. So they're partners together. Just to close, so the cornfield is not a space of rational mastery of non-human nature, but rather it's a site of interspecies labor practices in which that demand a kind of touching and a kind of queer intimacy. So yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you all for listening.